All right. So, Hare Krishna, dear devotees, thank you all for being here today as always. We continue our discourse from the SRIMAD BHAGAVATAM. And today we are very fortunate, very much blessed to have the association of Her Grace CITI-SAKTI Devi, who does not need any introduction. She's one of us, but in case you are not quite familiar with her, she is my god sister. She's a disciple of His Holiness Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj. She is from UK. She's a medical doctor. And she is also a very prolific and renowned speaker and practitioner of the Bhakti cult that was cultivated, taught by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, given to us to Jagat Guru Sri Prabhupada. So everybody knows Sahade likes to talk. And I would like to end here, and then Mother CITI-SAKTI, you will take it over from here if you're ready. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. So you can hear me all clearly? No problems?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to go straight into the verse. We'll do the verse, the purport, and then do Mangalarchanam. So I'm going to share my screen. Am I co-host?
Okay. So let me
or you can share the screen. It's no problem.
Hold on. Let me make you a co-host. So if you have to share, you may share. All right. I think it might be better if you share from your...
Sure, no problem.
Yes.
Okay, can you all see that clearly?
Yes.
Okay, so
yes.
We're going to be reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, first chapter, verse 26. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Patalam etasya padamulam vatanti parishni prapade rasatalam mahatalam vishvashijotha gulfa talatalam vai purushasya jange. Translation. Persons who have realized it have studied that the planets known as Patala constitute the bottoms of the feet of the Universal Lord, and the heels and the toes are the Rasatal planets. The ankles are the Mahatal planets, and his shanks constitute the Talatal planets. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Outside the bodily existence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the manifested cosmic existence has no reality. Everything and anything of the manifested world rests on him, as confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 9:4. But that does not imply that everything and anything in the vision of a materialist is the Supreme Personality. The conception of the universal form of the Lord gives a chance to the materialist to think of the Supreme Lord, but the materialist must know for certain that his visualization of the world in a spirit of lording over it is not God realization. The materialistic view of exploitation of the material resources is occasioned by the illusion of the external energy of the Lord. And as such, if anyone wants to realize the supreme truth by conceiving of the universal form of the Lord, he must cultivate the service attitude. Unless the service attitude is revived, the conception of Virat realization will have very little effect on the seer. The Transcendental Lord, in any conception of his form, is never a part of the material creation. He keeps his identity as Supreme Spirit in all circumstances and is never affected by the three material qualities. for everything material is contaminated. The Lord always exists by his internal energy. The universe is divided into 14 planetary systems. 7 planetary systems called Bhur, Bhavar, Swa, Mahar, Janas, Tapas, and Satya are upward planetary systems, one above the other. There are also 7 planetary systems downwards, known as Atal, Vital, Sutal, Talatal, Mahatal, Rasatal, and Patal, gradually one below the other. In this verse, the description begins from the bottom because it is in the line of devotion that the Lord's bodily description should begin from his feet. Shukadev Goswami is a recognized devotee of the Lord, and he is exactly correct in the description. So please join me. I know I won't be able to hear you, but please join me with Mangalarchanam so we can invoke the blessing, so we can understand what we've just read. Om Gyan Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yata Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sarvadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padha Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jugatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I'll just recite the verse again. Persons who have realized it have studied that the planets known as Batal constitute the bottoms of the feet of the Universal Lord, and the heels and the toes are the Rasatal planets. The ankles are the Mahatal planets, and his shanks constitute the Talatal planets. So we are in the section of the Srimad Bhagavatam where it's being explained to us how one can see the Lord in his universal creation, how we can see him in such a way that even outside of one sadhana, there is an ability to connect. But for one who maybe hasn't already approached devotional service, they can see the greatness of the universe, the person behind the universe around them. And it can be a stepping stone into devotion. So in this particular purport, what I find very wonderful about what Srila Prabhupada does is, although the Srimad Bhagavatam itself, Shukadev Goswami is almost systematically building Parikshit Maharaj from understanding, the general principles of spiritual life, and then creating a bridge to take him right to pure devotion. Srila Prabhupada, in his purports, in every section, he finds a way to relate even those things which are on the surface more impersonal, on the surface might seem at first sight less like devotional service. He has a way to relate it to devotional service. For example, there may be some devotees sitting on this call thinking, well, Virat Rup, not so much to do with us bhakti yogis, maybe it's for other people, it's not for us. But actually what Srila Prabhupada explains in this purport and unpicks this verse in such a way that even as bhakti yogis, even as devotees of Krishna, we can relate, we can understand. And he starts this from the very first sentence. So, the very first sentence of the purport, outside the bodily existence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the manifested cosmic reality, the manifested cosmic existence has no reality. Where's Prabhupada saying here? He's in the first sentence, he's basically saying, yes, we have this way of understanding Krishna, so many different ways of experiencing Krishna's energy. But actually the reality, the fact is that all reality, the essence of all reality is that it's Krishna. Even the Virat Rup, it's actually Krishna. That's reality. The only thing that is not real is our perception. And whether we have a perception of reality or whether we have an illusory perception, that depends on our vision and what our vision is informed by. So, for example, this first sentence, how Srila Prabhupada just very immediately just says, yes, this is there, but please know that this is Krishna. Virat Rup is still Krishna. And being able to see Virat Rup as Krishna is not a materialistic conception. Okay, it's the material. He goes on to explain how actually when we are perceiving Krishna as material environment for us to enjoy, because you look at the Virat Rup, whether it's the upper planetary systems or the lower planetary systems, each individual living in the upper planetary systems and the lower planetary systems on our planetary system is moving around in their environment thinking, I have this job to do, I have these people to look after, I have this particular identity, and the fact of the matter is we are surrounded by Krishna and Krishna is within. But if we have any other perception of our surroundings, okay, if we have any other perception other than it is my relationship with Krishna and there's me and that's Krishna and there's somehow or another I'm connected to Krishna, whether it's my role, whether it's my body, whether it's the mountains around me, whether it's the upper planetary system or the lower planetary system, anything outside of that, anything that is not connecting our outsides and our insides to Krishna is not reality. Right? He explains that this is one particular sentence he uses. He uses this word occasioned. Where is it? I need to find it. It's the word occasioned. I don't know if anybody can see it. There we go. The materialistic view of exploitation of the material resources is occasioned by the illusion of the external energy of the Lord. Okay, this idea that whatever's around me is not Krishna, is nothing to do with him, is all his illusionary energy. So it's still him, but it's the part of him that allows us to be covered over. Whereas Prabhupada goes on to say that really, even to understand the things around us as being Krishna, just knowing that factually doesn't work. It's not going to stick. Because what is the difference between illusory energy and the internal energy and clear vision, being able to see reality? He says it's the service attitude. One has to develop the service attitude. And actually, service attitude is, or the revival of our service attitude is Krishna consciousness. That's this whole process of Krishna consciousness, is to reawaken our service attitude and dissolve our God complex. Now, how does this all work? We've read about it so many times. We've read Bhagavad Gita, we've read SRIMAD Bhagavatam, we've been to so many classes. And yet we still have and maintain the illusion from time to time maybe all the time, maybe most of the time. There's some degree that one is, whilst we're still here, we're maintaining some illusion that there's some aspect of my surroundings or my identity or what's within me that is somehow or another not connected to Krishna. And it's when it's in this illusion, we either end up enjoying it, exploiting it, fearing it, or avoiding it. Right? This is what the false ego does. Because the whole idea of the external energy, this Mahamaya, the reality that Mahamaya sets up for us is that she says, okay, you don't want to see reality. You want to see a different version. So then I have to give you ideas and a perception that skews reality, that makes it look different. Right? It's like when you get a chip on your windscreen when you're driving. Of course, it, blocks your vision, doesn't it? Things don't look so clear. Or there's dust on your windscreen. Things don't look so clear. In fact, when there's dust on your windscreen, things look scary. Don't know if it's raining too heavily. If anyone's ever driven when it's raining too heavily, you kind of get scared because you can't see clearly. You can't see clearly in front of you. And I think that pretty much sums up what it feels like to be an illusion, whether you're a theist or an atheist, right? If you are heavily in illusion, because quite frankly, you can believe in God and still choose to be an illusion, right? We may be so into the institution and the religion that we forget about Krishna. And the religion and the institution may just be another way for us to feed another false ego, a different type of false ego of being a religious person. That actually is still scary. To be a religious person is still scary. And how scared are we? Depends on how much do we need Mahamaya to intervene and fan our false ego. What do we mean by false ego? False ego means, that identity which is not. So our temporary egos. How much do we want her to continue to maintain a certain script and a story for us that keeps us separate? So this point that Prabhupada says, bam, in this first sentence, where he literally just says that, outside the bodily existence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the manifested cosmic existence has no reality. Because this reality, the only reality is everything's Krishna. So anything else we see, any other perception we have, has been set up by Mahamaya. Okay? So this whole process of Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada describes, and the whole aim of Krishna consciousness is to revive the service attitude. Because we may have facts like this, that describes the bottom of Krishna's feet as being the lower planetary systems. But unless there's a service attitude, one may take this as simple theology, something to get a degree with. And there are plenty of people who have qualifications in the SRIMAD Bhagavatam. They probably can recite verses better than any of us here. They can probably tell you the reference quicker than many of us here. But if they don't have a service attitude, then what is it? It's simply another layer of illusion, because you're not seeing reality. The same verse can either help us to come closer to Krishna, or it can, again, keep us away. Don't you agree? There are so many there's so many scholars these days who take a real interest in the Vedic texts. They dig out Vedic texts that maybe even we've never heard of or will never see or lay our hands on. They know Prabhupada's books backwards, but they haven't distilled or imbibed or extracted or had a desire to have developed this service attitude. And where there's no service attitude, then there has to be, Mahamaya has to intervene. Whereas Yogamaya, the internal energy, she's the other side, or the true side, the softened face of Srimati Radharani, is there to facilitate, is there to reawaken our service attitude. However, the Virat Rup has an important role, because the Virat Rup can be a stepping stone outside of illusory perception to reality. And for many people, it can serve like that. Elsewhere in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it speaks about how we have 3 gurus before we come to the guru that gives us God. And one of those 3 gurus is nature, looking around us, looking at the greatness of what's around us, looking at the things around us in awe and wonder. Volcanoes, valleys, mountains, the stars in the sky, the fact that it doesn't matter how much scientists study our universe and the millions of galaxies that are around, they're still in awe. That seems to be unending, never ending. Right? They never reach a point where they're satisfied. It's always, I want more. I need to know more. Why? Because Krishna is inconceivable. Krishna is amazing. There's always more. And if material energy is never ending and inconceivable, imagine how much more there is when we face the person Krishna. So this Virat Roop can be a stepping stone of illusory perception. So it shouldn't be dismissed, especially as Bhakti Yogas. We can sometimes maybe dismiss parts of the Bhagavatam that don't relate directly to bhakti, but it's important that we don't, because our doubts are not always manifest immediately. Some of our doubts are very deep. Some of our other desires are latent. They're hibernating, and they may crop up later. And so when these doubts and areas of our Krishna consciousness which aren't yet manifest, which need strengthening, come up, then it can be helpful to us to return to texts which we may have initially thought, this has no role for me in bhakti, but you never know. That might be the very verse that saves you, right? When someone's feeling low in their Krishna consciousness, where they can't connect with the personal feature of Krishna, maybe someone's disappointed you, maybe you've lost faith in yourself. At least you can look around you. And because they've had this desire and have this desire to develop this service attitude, Krishna won't forsake you, Guru won't forsake you. Just when you need it, it comes up. And you may remember this verse. You may not even remember the exact verse word for word, but you may remember, wow, actually, Krishna, right now, I don't see you as a person. Or right now, I'm struggling with Guru. I'm struggling with the process. I'm struggling with myself. But isn't this world amazing? Looking around, this artistry, this paintwork, only Krishna could have made something so beautiful, painted such a beautiful picture. So this Virat Rupa can be an important stepping stone. For me, I feel like sections of the Bhagavatam which maybe don't directly relate to bhakti, especially on first reading, are the ones sometimes that I pay more attention to, because I'm like, okay, I'm going to put you in my reserve bank for a rainy day when the usual verses don't hit home, But the thing is with Srila Prabhupada, as I opened with, he's just amazing. He manages to give us the bhakti approach to everything. So really, for me, this verse really focuses on reality versus perception of reality. Now, our process of Krishna consciousness is really about dissolving our God complex, right? It's interesting. Krishna's God, but he doesn't have a God complex. Krishna is God, but he doesn't have a God complex. In this purport, Prabhupada describes how Krishna is always with his internal energy. Internal energy means service attitude. That means Krishna's own consciousness is always immersed in service attitude. Okay, he always sees through the eyes of service. He always interacts with us through an attitude of service. Whether our desire is to be kept away from him or whether our desire is to come closer to him, his attitude is always one of service. And this is something that is not just evident philosophically. After all, this whole material creation, he created for us because we asked for it. I want to be separate from you. So he says, okay, I'll do as you wish. But being loving and humble, I'll do as you wish, but I'll also create a way for you to reconnect, just in case you change your mind. Because you might want to walk away from me, but I don't want to let you go. This is service. I'm always here. I'm always here to serve you. And then when we want to return to him, somehow or another, I think we've all had this experience, as our desire to dissolve the God complex reduces and our desire to develop the service attitude increases, more and more opportunities come about. And those opportunities aren't just some of the stories we may have experienced ourselves or heard from others that when you first take up Krishna consciousness, all these big changes happen in your life and the right book falls on your lap or the right person meets you at the right place. Even that kind of magic, one starts to experience that kind of magic even in the day-to-day reading, right? When you go back to the same verse or the same purport and something else manifests. Why? Because our consciousness is different. Oh, I want to dissolve the propensity to be God. And I really just want to nourish and nurture and kindle this service attitude. Suddenly more is manifest. More appears. This is magic. This is magic, magical words. You know, ordinary magic is about using words to change your externals, right? But spiritual magic is the words that are in front of you change what they manifest in terms of your understanding and your vision without changing anything around you. This is spiritual life. So using the Virat Roop, though, is another act of Krishna's service attitude. For those who want to stay away from him, they can take it as it's just material nature, another mountain for me to climb, another ocean for me to dive in, another country to conquer, another house to build, right? Another enemy to run away from. So that same Virat Roop is for many people, same place where Krishna says, okay, out of service for you, I have created this world and given you. As he says, you know, when someone puts faith in something, or when someone has desire for something, Bhagavad Gita explains that I give them the faith from within to pursue it. It's okay, you want to stay away from me. So here I am. Everything here is all me. But I will, you know, get Mahamaya will do her service of making sure that even though you are surrounded by me, even though I am within you, you won't see me. You won't see. This is a service attitude. But when we turn around and say, okay, Krishna, Virat Roop, wonderful. How can I serve you? And that same Virat Roop becomes a stepping stone to bhakti. Wow. That mountain, I could climb it and I have climbed it, but it's so beautiful and it's not man-made. I wonder who's behind this. As I was climbing the mountain and my foot slipped, I could have fallen off and died. But I didn't. Almost like an unseen force saved me. Who was that? My enemy was about to kill me, but somehow I was unharmed. How did that happen? See, this when we look around and the desire to reconnect, just even that question, is there someone to reconnect with? Gives Krishna then a different message. And in his service attitude, because he's the devotee of his devotees. And we are all devotees ultimately. So he's constantly meditating on how to bring us back. He says, oh, okay, let me lift the veil a little bit. Let me lift the veil a little bit. Here's a book. Here's someone who's on the path. Send people that they can start to have spiritual conversations with. So it's all to do with desire. And ultimately, desire's down to what we expose ourselves to. And that's a fact. We will never desire anything we're not exposed to. And whatever we're exposed to, we will increase our desire for what we're exposed to. Either the desire to have it or the desire to avoid it. It's directly related. So we want to change the outcomes of our life. You want to change your future. First thing to do is exposure. But exposure is also contextual, right? Like Prabhupada's explaining here. Now, actually, to understand Virat Roop, we need service attitude. Otherwise, again, one can just go, okay, it's a nice mountain to climb, rather than, wow, look at the person behind the mountain and who that mountain actually is. Prabhupada also mentions how this approaching the universal form Virat Roop with talking about the lower planetary systems and the conception that they are the soles of the Lord's feet. So we start with the bottom of the feet. He says this is actually the proper way to approach Krishna. Why? Because even in devotional service, even where we have been given, oh, you know, the highest goal is really to love God so much that you forget he's God and he forgets he's God. Love God so much that you forget he's God and he forgets he's God. So much so that actually being God is just something Krishna does. It's not who he is. He is Krishna. And but to get there, it's not a leap. You can't just jump to that. We have to go through a process. And to connect with greatness on an intimate level, we have to also appreciate how great that person is. And so the Virat Roop starts with the feet, because in order to, when you approach someone who's great, in order to really appreciate them and show that you're appreciating them, don't we always hear when you approach the devotee, you start with the feet. You look at the Lord's lotus feet, right? So we look at the Lord's lotus feet. It's like the gaze starts down and it looks up. It's respectful. It's also very intimate. It's also very intimate. Anybody who's ever seen a romantic film will notice that whether it's the, in Bollywood films, they always show the first moment after the bride and groom have either just got married or they're getting married, and the groom lifts the veil of the bride, right? It's not like he's never really seen her face before, she's never seen him, but she's looking down and she looks up slowly. There's a respect and an intimacy to that. So this, Prabhupada is explaining this, awe and reverence has to be developed first, rather than just jumping straight to bhakti. And it's important, because if our utsaha, our enthusiasm, is to go straight to, oh, I want to just love Krishna because he's so cute, or he's so handsome, or he's so fun and he's so funny, we may initially have strong feelings. But then when there are struggles in our life, our faith may weaken, because we haven't really fully understood how, yes, God is ultimately a person, but this person, he's amazing. He can do some pretty far out stuff, and he controls everything, and yet lets us feel like we control everything. And he trusts us completely to make our choices. And yet we haven't yet developed the trust in him. So approaching Krishna with awe and reverence comes easier when we know what to be in awe of and what to revere. Right? If you don't understand, if you haven't seen, if you haven't read, if you haven't heard about Krishna's greatness, his greatness beyond even the acts of God in Goloka Vrindavan, his greatness as God. If we don't see or hear about the extent of that, then that very important part of love is missing. Because with love, at some point, before it gets to a point of familiar intimacy, there's got to be some recognition of, wow, this person's awesome. This person's so great. I really have appreciation, because awe and reverence sounds impersonal, but it doesn't have to be. Awe and reverence can be very grateful, and it can be intimate. So this is, it's then from then that we can then move upwards and gaze upon the face with intimacy and familiarity. So I think this verse is very powerful, and Prabhupada's purport is very multi-layered, reminding us that there isn't a verse in sacred texts. There's nothing that has been spoken that can't be related, that cannot be used to nourish the service attitude, that cannot be used to show us how we can overcome and protect against doubts that may manifest in the mind. I want to wind down with looking at this very last section of the purport. Actually, it's the very last sentence. Srila Prabhupada says, Shukadev Goswami is a recognized devotee of the Lord, and he is exactly correct in his description. exactly correct. Sukadev Goswami is exactly correct. Sukadev Goswami can only, based on what's already been explained, Sukadev Goswami can really only be exactly correct if he is correctly and fully seeing reality. If he's fully and completely seeing reality. And it's already been explained that we only really see the full reality when our complete service attitude has been awakened. So this is another way of saying that, you know, he is qualified. He's exactly correct because he's qualified by his affection and love and attachment to the Lord. He does not see the barriers. He doesn't have the sheets of rain on his windscreen. He's not scared. He's fearless. He's fearless with speaking the truth. He's clear in experiencing the truth. And there's no doubt. Because when you see reality, when you put illusion next to reality, the illusion disappears. There's no need for it, right? There's no need for it. And it's not just Prabhupada saying this, that Sukadev Goswami is qualified. He's exactly correct. He's exactly correct because his vision is perfect. He's also saying he's a recognized devotee of the Lord. Now, what do we mean by that? Recognized devotee of the Lord. When we think of recognition, what comes to your mind? When you think of recognition, you probably think, oh, people have heard of him, people know him. That's what people normally think, right? The word recognize means if people see you in the street, they know who you are. You know, they may have forgotten your name, but oh, I know that person. But the way Prabhupada is using a recognized devotee, he's not just recognized as in, hey, there's Sukadev Goswami. He's got bluish skin and long hair and doesn't wear any clothes. You know, this isn't the kind of recognition Srila Prabhupada's talking about. It's not even, oh, Sukadev Goswami, he's that amazing speaker. No, he's saying he's a recognized devotee. Recognized devotee. And not devotee because he's got a new name and neck beads on his neck and wears tilak. A recognized devotee who is exactly right, who has full vision. He's a manifested devotee. He's a ripe devotee. His devotion is complete. His devotion is complete, independent of whether people recognize it or not. And in one sense, it makes the term then a recognized devotee redundant. It makes it redundant because his devotion is so strong that even though on the surface he doesn't seem like a devotee, right? We read in the Bhagavatam, I think we did this last time when we were in the first canto, how children were teasing him and chasing after him, right? Oh, who is this? Who is this? But they didn't recognize him. They didn't go, wow, there's Sukadev Goswami, you know, Radharani's parrot, come to this planet to give us pure devotional service. They were just teasing and laughing and being silly. It's not that kind of recognition. But in spite of not appearing to be like a devotee, in spite of looking like a madman, he's recognized as a devotee. Why? Because Krishna sees him, he sees Krishna, and their relationship is manifest. So Sukadev Goswami has this exact mood that we're talking about here, completely connected with the internal energy, with the mood of a service complex, not a God complex. Okay, I'm your servant. So this idea of recognition, the way, you know, everything here is a perverted reflection. Devotional and spiritual recognition is that bhakti is there, even when it's not manifest on the surface. Where the material perverted reflection is we chase after a recognition, even if it doesn't quite match up with what's going on underneath. Right? You can have plenty of people are famous singers, but their voice isn't very good. Isn't it? So I guess I'd just like to close with, I think my take-home points from this particular verse are that this, please let us not dismiss verses that don't overtly seem related to pure devotional service. Let's always try to see how can this help me to develop my service attitude and connect with Yogamaya rather than Mahamaya. The second point is, as we as devotees progress in our Krishna consciousness, are we weeding out pseudo-devotional identities, which are just maintaining our illusion. We were speaking about this in class the other day because there have been so many things discussed recently, especially publicly, about the tragedies that have happened in our community. And, people have said this to me directly: how can the holy name work? And all of these things happen. The holy name works because the holy name is there to make us remember who we are, remember who Krishna is, and our relationship with him, which all of those three things are steeped in seva. Whereas a position or a function in a society, even in a religious society, even in a spiritual society, and yes, even in our society, and to that end, any external activity isn't a direct correlation on whether the holy name is making someone Krishna conscious. But we know this. Someone can be a nobody in the institution, a nobody on the planet, and be very Krishna conscious. And somebody can be a somebody to others and not have that Krishna consciousness awakened in them, where they know who they are, they know who Krishna is, and they know their relationship with him. So we should not feel so despondent about the process not working. We should have full faith in the holy name, because it does. Krishna does what he says he's going to do. You call me, I'll come to you. You call me, you'll remember who you are. You call me, you'll remember what we mean to each other and how. And you'll meet your entire community, everybody, eventually. And all of these things that go on, that shouldn't go on, we'll also have the intelligence to deal with them on a practical level. We'll have the intelligence to deal with them on a metaphysical level and on a spiritual level, without seeing the happenings of the community around us as a direct reflection of Krishna's love. Because quite frankly, there is, it's actually quite a beginner and Kanishta thing for us to look for when we're in the beginnings of our spiritual life. And this can be a sign for ourselves. We can see our own maturity. How much is my translation of whether Krishna's mercy is acting through the external events in my life? What I lose, what I gain, what other people lose, what they gain. How much of that am I using as a barometer of Krishna's mercy? Quite frankly, it's not an accurate measure, because there are a million other things that can navigate, what's going on in our surroundings, what's going on in our life. For example, if we see leaders compromised, and being compromised in their own practice is one thing, but to then exploit others, I think it shakes people's faith to the core. How can that happen? How can that happen if the holy name works? This question is sometimes raised. Well, because people come in with Sukriti, they come with spiritual bank accounts. They also can, be surrounded by people who externally have reasons to maintain, sometimes out of care, sometimes out of fear, reasons to maintain certain bad behaviors. None of these are there to justify. I'm not saying anything to justify it. But what I'm saying is they can come in with certain spiritual credits and they float, they cruise on those credits until a tipping point comes, where not only have they run out of credits, but they've made so many offenses and hurt so many people that it can no longer be hidden, it can no longer be tolerated, and it must be dealt with on a social level, on a spiritual level, on a metaphysical level, on all of these levels. And we as a community should grow and move forward from it. Even those who weren't directly involved, they can always apologize about their oversight. When people apologize, they drop a lot of karma and they allow the people around them to heal also, because the human side will always make mistakes. And then it allows us to set about not just helping those who've done wrong to reform, but also dealing with them and them having outcomes and consequences, which may involve other parties, which may involve outside parties, for their protection and the protection of others. Anyway, that's a big topic, but the reason I wanted to raise it is because this whole question that this purport raises about this service attitude, not God complex. It's the God complex in our Krishna consciousness that can also hide behind our principles, our practices, and especially around our positions in a spiritual community. So we must each as individuals be very careful that we are again not taking shelter of the illusionary energy just in the disguise of spiritual life. Thank you so much. And I will take your comments, your corrections, your questions. I can go until 5, so I can go for another half an hour maximum, if that's okay. Sadhu Prabhu, are you happy for me to go direct to people, or you want to pick?
No, you can. Thank you so much for the wonderful katha you shared with us. I have some questions, but we'll go to Kavikanapur Prabhu.
Sure.
Yes.
Prabhu, you'll have to unmute. Hare Krishna.
Yes, thank you very much, Mataji, for your wonderful lecture. Very deep and very practical also. And my question is that when you were talking about Krishna being, he has to take the role of God, if he, although he doesn't have God complex. And I saw you were talking about all our reverence and devotee being intimate with him. So I've seen that because we devotee, we talk more about this God intimacy. And sometimes, even while we are in environment or in society, we don't behave nicely because you see those people who are on the platform of our reverence, they tend to be scared of sin.
Mm-hmm.
They tend to be scared of sinful activities. But we say that we are very close to God and we are preaching a very advanced philosophy and we talk about intimacy. Sometimes when you see what we do, it's like you'll be surprised, be amazed that how can somebody who say is very intimate with God, loving God, how can he do this?
Mm.
So how does this intimacy help devotees to upgrade their consciousness, or how does all our reverence help to shape our consciousness so that we can really develop this true love? Thank you. That is my question, Mataji. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that's such a good question, that being given such a complete philosophy, we often use the term high, but actually I would say it's a complete philosophy. So because it's complete and all-encompassing, everything else is within it, including awe and reverence. And yes, awe and reverence does. We see, yeah, I agree with you. Sometimes you see people who, because they have awe and reverence for God, they're scared of the consequences of sinning, and so they behave well. But real intimacy means that we behave well out of love, right? You look at parents with children. You ask any parent, would you rather your child was obedient because they're scared of you, or they do what you've guided them to do because they actually love and respect you so much? In fact, because respect goes hand in hand with love. There's so much affection, so much gratitude for the relationship that you two have that they can't help but represent you nicely. Bhakti Maharaj would often talk about this, how actually you can really tell when a child is good, not so much how they behave when they're around their parents, but how they behave when their parents are not there, right? And so I agree with you. Yes, sometimes if we focus too much on this, oh yeah, we've got this complete philosophy and God's, Krishna's merciful, he's kind, he's got our back, there's no loss or diminution. You're right. It can lead to this sense of entitlement almost, that I'm a devotee of Krishna. I can have whatever I want, whenever I want, and it doesn't matter how I behave. But that means we don't have that much intimacy, and we don't really have a complete understanding of the philosophy. Because if one thing, yes, okay, they're chanting the holy names clears more sins than we can ever commit. But if we continue to commit sin, knowing that, then we're committing an offense of committing sins on the strength of the holy name. Furthermore, one thing our process really warns us against is offending others. And that's far worse than sinning. Sins can be countered. You do something bad, you can do something good to undo it, right? We have this even in our legal system, right? If you've done something bad, you can do community service, right? You don't have to go to prison, do community service instead. And or if you do go to prison, you're allowed out early because you've done such good work in the prison. So even that's there. But think about the person who actually, they're just a really good member of society because they love others. You know, they don't, it's not that they don't go around beating people up because they're scared of going to jail. They just don't beat people up because they actually love other people, right? So in terms of offenses, though, we offend others if we behave badly and offend other people. And, you know, sometimes you might think, yeah, but it's only really with Vaishnavas that you get a reaction. Oh, the more advanced we get, the more qualified we are, accountability also increases. And because one should then also be seeing that everybody ultimately is a Vaishnava, just like Krishna is in everything and everything is Krishna. That's the only reality. So everyone's a Vaishnava. And to the degree that we're advanced, to the degree that we're accountable, if you've been exposed to the whole philosophy and have heard it, then you're expected to, we've given you the whole dish. We've given you all the powers. Now use them responsibly. And if you offend others, then it will be taken away from you temporarily. If you don't represent, it's like a diplomat. If a diplomat doesn't represent the country properly, they lose that nice flashy car they get. They lose the driver. They lose the ability to move in other environments and not have to be subjected to the laws of the other countries. But as long as the diplomat is representing properly, so then the diplomat gets to be protected. So the process works. The fact that people fall down, the fact that people do things which are improper is a sign, and then get caught, is a sign that the process works. Because you can't cheat Krishna and you can't cheat the process. So yes, I agree with you. We do see this. That doesn't mean it's okay. And I think if we see ourselves doing that, if we're using shortcuts in society, actually Prabhupada said we should be the most civilized because we've got such a complete philosophy. We have even more reasons to behave nicely, to behave properly, knowing that actually I'm not just loving you and caring for you. In fact, the way I treat you is a direct reflection of how I treat Krishna.
Thank you very much, ma.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much, the CITI-SAKTI. I have a question, please. And now there is this common saying, which I believe tends to be true, that oftentimes those who live close to the train station miss the train. And we see from the description given by Shukadeva Goswami, the lowest planetary systems are the hellish planets. And they are very, very close to Krishna. And we as devotees are very close to Krishna. Just as the hellish planets are very close to Krishna, yet they miss Krishna. They miss Krishna because they do not have the service attitude that you were talking about towards Krishna. So my question is 2 in 1. Is it possible that as devotees, even though we are very close to Krishna, that without a real sense of service attitude, we may also miss Krishna, just as those who are very close to Krishna in the hellish planets miss Krishna? And is it also possible that those who may, like, geographically be further away from Krishna attain Krishna? Because they are rendering service to Krishna, even though proximity-wise they may not be close to Krishna? That's my question. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Yes, I mean, Prabhupada uses this phrase in the purport that Krishna consciousness means to revive the service attitude, right? To revive it. It's there in everybody. Whether on the surface, geographically, we are close or far away from Krishna, or time-wise, in terms of yugas, we are far away or close to Krishna, or philosophically, whether we have information about Krishna or not. The key thing is this service attitude. Is there, to what degree is there an element of service attitude in my experience, understanding, and expression of my spiritual practices? And so because it's transcendental, service attitude and Krishna consciousness is transcendental to time and space. It means that geographically, one can be far away from Krishna and still be close. And yet geographically, one can be close and be far away. For example, we have demigods such as Brahma, who could see Krishna's pastimes right in front of his eyes. But there was a distance, and that distance was created by pride. Same for Indra. He could view Krishna, like he could see his face. He could see everything he was doing. He was that close. He was that close. He couldn't see him because of pride. So geography is not the deciding factor. Philosophy is also not the deciding factor, because as Krishna says, of the many who come to me, very few attain me. Because this God desire to lord it over material nature, this God complex, which Krishna lacks and which we as Jiva also lack, is the covering that has it, right? The false ego has the God complex. It is, if that is still there, then even having the complete perfect philosophy is not properly utilized, because that seed, that what Mahamaya does is, okay, do you now want to use all this that you know about Krishna to stay away from him? You don't want to serve? Okay, fine. We can also make arrangements. We can make arrangements that you think you're a great devotee, and even other people may think you're a great devotee, because there are plenty of people out there who want to be cheated as well. And we'll maintain this illusion for you. And then you can, as you said, miss that train. Equally, we also hear, for example, the St. Francis of Assisi, that philosophy, the philosophy of the Bible doesn't really go into Madhurya Ras. It doesn't go into so much intimacy or personal relationship with God, or even Krishna's pastimes. And yet in his writings, his meditations are on a conjugal loving relationship with Krishna. Where did that come from? It came from his service attitude, which he revived because of his surrendered loving mood towards God, which meant that everything he needed to open up and revived in his heart happened independent of the fact that not only was he geographically separated, he'd never with his materialized maybe even seen a picture of Krishna. He may not have even read the Vedic texts. I don't know so much about St. Francis of Assisi. And yet, because Krishna can't be held back by anything or anyone, he's there for him. And ultimately, as we're hearing in this verse, and as Prabhupada says, the only reality is Krishna. Any other way we perceive those things that are around us is just illusory. Which is why I was emphasizing this point as Vaishnavas, we have to be careful, because unless we have good association and actually take good association and give good association and engage in the 6 loving exchanges, just if it's just us and our mind, it's very unlikely that we are going to detect how illusory energy and how Mahamaya has seeped in and hidden behind what can on the surface appear to be devotional and close. And we just end up being sahajas.
Thank you so much for answering my question. Daddy, what is, if anyone has a question, comment, realization, you may do so by using the hand emoji or using your physical hand, and you'll be asked to unmute to speak. Hare Krishna. See, Mother, I just came out from Bhagavatam class that we do weekly from Mayapur.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody asked a question, which I would like to bring it up here.
Okay.
And the question was about Shukadev Goswami. Because there have been many people say this, many places, many times, and even on our platform here, And we've asked many people where they got that information from, and unfortunately, nobody's been able to give it to us yet. So the question was, Shukadev Goswami was already a self-realized soul in his mother's womb. But when he came out of his mother's womb, he wasn't ready to listen to anything. He was ready to take to the Himalayas. And somehow the father sat him down and then taught him the SRIMAD BHAGAVATAM, the Puranas. And then the same service attitude, he became a servant of the Lord. So the question was, if Shukadev Goswami was Srimati Radharani's parrot, like we hear from many people say, how come that he was so much fearful of the material energy? And then two, if Shukadev was not even Radharani's parrot, but he was already self-realized, he was impersonalist. These impersonalists see nothing outside of Krishna. And therefore, they are fearless in some ways because everything is Krishna to them. So how come this fear that Shukadev was having, that he actually was reluctant to come out of his mother's womb? So these were like some questions somebody asked, and the teacher said that as to Shukadev being Radharani's parrot, he hasn't read it from anywhere, so that he cannot answer to that. But he hasn't read does not mean that that is.
So there's a lot of questions in that question. So if I lose track, you'll have to rein me in. Okay.
I will. Okay.
So Sukadev Goswami, one thing we have to realize is his fear of material nature was not fear of material nature. It was fear of being disconnected from his true self and his intimacy. Okay. He did not need to hear the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Vedas.
Are you a financial person?
Hold on.
I need money.
I'll give it. Okay.
He did not need to hear the Bhagavatam and the Vedas, etc., because he needed those things to wake him up. He needed to hear them so he could do his service of distributing, because that's why he was sent. This is what parrot does, right? Sends messages. He needed to send rather than Krishna's message to this world, to Parikshit Maharaj. Look, this is how we go back. So he had to go through, even Krishna has a spiritual master. He already knows who he is. Why does he need to learn the Vedas? He's the one who's, they're his knowledge. Everything's come. Why does he need to learn about himself from somebody else? Okay. So, and now these two things. So one, if Shukadev Goswami had not been taught the Vedas, had not been taught the, everything from his father, then there would have been a step missed. If he'd just come across Parikshit Maharaj and taught him, that would have led to a bunch of people going, yeah, see, you don't need to have a guru. There are people who just can get the whole of bhakti instilled in their heart just by doing nothing, just by going to the Himalayas and just meditating on it, and they can propagate devotional service. Now, you can do that with Brahma Jyoti realization, but even a Brahma Jyoti realized person had to have some sort of teacher and guru. But in our bhakti process, the emphasis on guru is so strong, because bhakti is the most complete relationship with God. Okay, so Shukadev Goswami didn't need to be trained, just like Arjun didn't really need the Bhagavad Gita to be spoken to him, right? So Shukadev Goswami did not need it. He was self-realized. He knew who he was. It just, for the Leela and to maintain this fact and truth, because the Lord does it himself, he has to have a spiritual teacher to teach him. And his fear of material nature was not fear because he is fearful the way a conditioned soul might be, fear of loss, fear of material gain or not getting their gain. But this fear, I don't want to be separated from my beloved. I'll stay in the womb. Nothing will get between us there. You know, I'll go to the Himalayas where there's no one to disturb me there. See? But then again, his father's like, no, I see my son has a role on this, in this world beyond just being a Bhajananandi and just relishing in himself. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It does. Especially about describing the reason behind Shukadev Goswami's fear. It makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much for the clarification. So if anyone has a question before we let Mother go, please.
Mm-hmm.
We don't oftentimes get her association, so let's try to disturb her a little bit.
Just want to say Hare Krishna to a few devotees as well who are saying Hari Bol in the chat. Janavatsala, Hare Krishna, Parameshwari, Hare Krishna.
Yeah, Janavatsala. Yes.
I see Radha Damdar cute in your background.
Well,
you can unmute.
It's good to see
Hare Krishna.
all the devotees here. I have a question.
Sure.
I was in another Zoom, so I arrived a little late, but after what I heard so far, and I heard you talk about that Krishna and Jews don't have God conflicts. That's inside of, I think you said that's inside of Maya.
Mm-hmm.
I heard you correctly. So I was curious about what that meant, since like everything that we can't have everything that exists in Krishna. Like we have equality, it's because Krishna is equality.
Mm-hmm.
And how is there something that is like a God complex that isn't in Krishna? Is it just because it's in his mind, it still exists in him because that's part of him?
Mm-hmm. Yes, everything's in Krishna, and everything comes from Krishna. But because Krishna, everything in Krishna is the way it should be, and in its perfect state. So even this idea of being God, when Krishna is God, he is God perfectly, because his service of being God is complete with all of his other qualities of humility, kindness, compassion, mercifulness, tolerance. Whereas in the perverted reflection, because we're separated from him, and we're separated actually from ourselves. So when we have a God complex, when the mind carries this thing of, I want to enjoy, I want to exploit, I want to avoid, I'm fearful, I want to defend, I want to protect, we don't have access to ours or his humility, service attitude, compassion, love, tolerance. Does that make sense? Because Krishna has to be able to think like God, to be God, to play the role of God. He has to be able to think like God, right? But because he's complete, see, the God complex talks about one particular, the emphasis is more on one particular attitude. When we talk about a God complex, it's feeling like the controller. This attitude of, I can control everything, I can influence everything, and I want control and influence over everything. That's actually, for God, that's a very small part of what God does. And a very small part of the psychological attitude of being God. There's a film, really old film, called Bruce Almighty. And in it, there's a character, some of you might have heard of the actor Jim Carrey. He's a comedian. And he gets to be God for like a day or two. It was a long time ago I watched it, but it's a really good film to illustrate how, as long as we have human psychology, we can't get into really being God. Because actually, if you want to be God, it's not about being able to give and distribute and deliver and make rules. Actually, God's driving force, Krishna's driving force, is service and love. That's why I say, God is just something Krishna does. It's not who he is. It's just he's God sometimes.
Yeah. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for the answer. See, my question here is, Shukadeva Goswami is talking about this 14 planetary systems. And this Earth planet is like in the beginning of the middle planetary system. Is this 14 planetary system kind of relative or is an absolute? And I'm thinking it's relative in the sense that being a typical African man and have had experiences, not theoretically, of other worlds within our Earth planet. In my village, there is another city in my village that is never known until at night, which is being used by witches. You know, we see like how actually that is said, like that is what actually led to Duryodhana trying to disrobe Draupadi, because Duryodhana was walking on a simile, a water that was created by Maya. So there are such worlds, but I do not think Shukadeva Goswami counts such worlds as part of what he is saying. Am I right in thinking that way?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, in answer to your question, yes, there's a relativity to it because there's so many ways this is relative. One is your understanding of time and space changes depending on where in the planetary systems you are, right? We know this from Brahma's lifespan and the demigod's lifespan. We even know this from this planet. We know this how, you know, to ants we're probably like demigods because they go through so many life cycles in just one of our days. But we also know this in terms of the difference in terms of how time and space move with our body and mind. When we're asleep and when we're awake, when we're daydreaming, when we're meditating, versus when we're, you know, very connected with residing in our bodies. So there's a relativity in that way, in terms of the way time and space moves. But there's also a relativity in the sense that it can't be absolute because each of Krishna's universes are different. So in some universes, there's probably a different setup of higher planetary systems and lower planetary systems because each universe even has a different type of Brahma with a different number of heads.
Yeah.
So there's always material creation is there to allow us to exist separately from Krishna. And since we have so many different desires, Krishna has to give us so many different realities, which are all relative. And they're also relative to our perception. But the only reality is him. Because ultimately, as he says, he's in every atom and molecule. Everything is born of him. And then there's him, the person, there's Krishna. You know, then there's his roles as God and his different expansions, etc. But it's all Krishna. This is what Prabhupada's emphasizing. Yes, all of these descriptions, they are relative. And what you connect with depends on your consciousness. Like you said, the village that only manifests at night, the witches use, or you go to Vrindavan and you go to Sevakunj. You don't go there once it's dark. It's all locked up because anybody who's gone there after dark, whether they're animals or people, either die, go mad, or go blind. Because there's things going on there that we don't have privy to, we shouldn't have privy to. So yeah, it is there. I think with Bhagavatam, Prabhupada says this in the first canto, that don't try to read the Bhagavatam with the normal conception of time and space, because the events described in Bhagavatam are not given in chronological order. They're also not given in any kind of specific, from any specific universe either. You know, like in the Bhagavatam, we hear about 3 different Brahmas. You know, we know our current Brahma is Krishna, but then we hear about a Brahma who runs after his daughter after creating her. He experiences lust. And you're thinking, well, hang on, if our current Brahma is Krishna, how does that happen? Well, because it's not talking about our current Brahma, it's talking about a different Brahma. So I think it's very important when we approach books like the Bhagavatam, we don't get too caught up in time and space, and especially with Krishna's pastimes, we don't get caught up in time and space. You know, sometimes people ask, oh, did Balaram really, how could his mum conceive and give birth to him 15 days after Krishna appeared? Well, hang on a minute. We're not talking about, first of all, even on a human level, an ordinary body, because they're in Dwapara Yuga. So time, space, biology is different. All right, if I look at blood pressure and pulse rate and the size of a human heart now, okay, and then you tell me actually we were 10 times taller, you know, and lived for 10 times longer, then your normal human current heart is not going to cut it. Okay, it's not going to be enough for the body to just pump a few liters of blood around the whole body every second. There's going to be different things. There's going to be more of the mind accessible than just 10%. Am I making sense? So we can't use our current parameters.
Yeah.
You wouldn't measure the volume of your room using a microscope.
No.
So relativity is important to bear in mind. So thank you for raising that question. I'm going to take this last question from Jana Vatsala, and then I have to go, I'm afraid.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Jana, please unmute.
Thank you so much for the answer to my first question. And it's good to be here with the devotees. I have the second question is about cheating Krishna, and just this phrase that you can't cheat Krishna. And when we're discussing that, like sometimes we want to be cheated, and you were discussing Sahajiyism. So I would really love to hear more about that, where we could try to examine where that's actually happening in our life and where it's not, and our mind could just say it's happening, just kind of trying to figure out, like, especially when you're trying to go deeper by pretending, or like the Church Maharaj talks about, or when you're trying to, I think there's a level of like, you want to think something like, say, Krishna's not doing anything right, and you can think about that to try to think like, yeah, I'm actually associating with Krishna while I'm chanting my japa, to try to go deeper, try to connect more emotionally. Of course, we actually realize that. So I think some of that comes in like remembering that you're not actually on that level where you realize that, even if you try to act like that. So just there's some mercy taking place. So I just love to hear more about that, because I don't want to get into this idea state, and just try to understand when I'm cheating and when I want to be cheated. You could help. So
just to clarify the Sahaja state, I used the phrase differently to what Sahaja is traditionally and shastrically meant. Normally in Shastra, Sahaja refers to, and Prabhupada describes it as the people who very overtly and externally act like they already have an intimate relationship with Krishna, when actually they don't really have any rules, sadhana, and in fact they're often breaking the rules in sadhana. I was using the phrase Sahaja more just as another way of just saying, you know, how much are we cheating ourselves? So I think for each of us, we have areas of our spiritual life which come easy to us, and other areas of our spiritual life which come more difficult, just like our human life. And the mind can often convince us that the areas of our spiritual life where we may be struggling may not be so much of a problem. I will look for justifications. Really, the only real test of not just is the process working, but am I engaging with the process in such a way that it works at its optimum for me? Is my taste for Krishna consciousness deepening, becoming stronger, and are my doubts becoming less? Now, this is going to look different at different stages of our Krishna consciousness. Until we are at Nishtha, then the goal is to become steady, right? So if one is thinking, is the process working at its optimum for me? Am I doing everything I can to allow it to work at its optimum? And I'm not looking for shortcuts. And that's what cheating means, to look for a shortcut, right? What's happening with my steadiness? And once one has achieved steadiness, one is then looking to develop love. We're doing things, okay, I want to develop love, so I'm going to do these very same things now to develop love. And once love is developed, then all of those things that we did out of duty, we start to do compelled by love. Okay, this is the difference between moving from Shraddha to Nishtha through to Bhav and then to Prem. So this Sahaja, or cheating, really means, where am I looking for shortcuts? Because that is the most simple explanation of cheating. So wherever we look for shortcuts in our devotional life, that is generally where we will find that we may even have an appearance of doing okay in that area, but actually we're not doing so okay. And if we are really strong on our cheating, it may take time for it to reveal itself. But because there are areas where we're also sincere, and because the process works, and especially if we keep association, because we'll attract blessings if we serve and we associate, Krishna will reveal where we're cheating. He'll reveal it, right? It's all about proportions. If it's the majority of our practice is looking for shortcuts and only a little bit of is authentic and genuine, then it'll be a long time before it's revealed to us. Because Krishna is like, okay, well, you don't even want to see that you're cheating. A cheater doesn't want to know they're cheating. Hands down, anybody who cheats, you tell them you're cheating, they get angry. They don't smile and laugh about it, unless it's just like, like some game between friends and you're having fun and you're kind of cheating and hey, look, I'm making it really obvious that I'm cheating. And you know that the other person knows that you're cheating. Other than that rare situation, most people get very defensive when you call them out on cheating. So Krishna is also compassionate. He knows if he calls us out straight away on our cheating, we may even run away. So if it's very strong, if it's out of proportion, like there's a lot of cheating and very little bhakti, he allows it. And then when the bhakti starts to outweigh the cheating, he says, oh, hey, you've been cheating here. And that's why you thought you had this, but you don't really. Actually, if you want this, if you actually want to be able to hear me when you're chanting, if you really want to seat me on the throne of your heart, it's about time you tightened up your shoelaces in this particular area of your spiritual life. So journaling helps, speaking to devotees helps, all of these things help. But ultimately, this thing of sincerity means an absence of cheating. That I will endeavor and be respectful and patient for Krishna's reciprocation. Not everybody else's reciprocation, that they should be seeing where I'm advancing, or even my own mind. My mind needs to be able to recognize where I'm making endeavor all the time, right? Sometimes we can get so into introspection, we're just getting to ourselves. It's just another way to get into ourselves. So there's got to be a balance, right? Introspection is one thing, journalism one thing, but what are we using as our gold standard? Where's the checking system with our introspection? Because when we're just us and our mind are alone, there can be quite an interesting dance that takes place. Am I making sense with this authenticity and cheating thing? Go step by step, but you're sincere and you're authentic. So you don't need to worry. There's anything that you think where, okay, maybe I'm looking for shortcuts. Krishna will help you, so don't worry. It's I think I was just really raising it more for, especially when we've been, as I say, around for a long time, right? One can feel a sense of entitlement and on a very surface level, feel like they've made it. But look back, if you've been around for 10, 20 years, has your taste for actually serving Krishna increased more than what you're recognized for? Because actually that's how it should be. We should be much greater devotees than we're recognized for being. Not that we're recognized to be greater devotees than we actually are, right? Because really our bhakti is between us and Krishna. And if we are greater devotees than other people recognize we are, wonderful. It shouldn't disturb us at all, because it means in my house I have a treasure while you all think I'm poor. Now imagine everybody thinks you're rich and inside you've got nothing, not even a loaf of bread. Which one do you want? Everybody thinks you're poor but you're wealthy, or everybody thinks you're wealthy but you're living like a pauper? So this is where eventually our heart and mind will go, you know what, I'm done with cheating. I actually want to be a devotee. I don't care whether anybody recognizes it or not. And those who've been around a while, if you've ever walked into a temple and a new bhakt or bhaktin has treated you like you're a visitor and starts preaching to you, if your ego got pinched, I'm talking to you. Or were you grateful that, wow, this person's doing such wonderful service? They don't care who's in front of them. They just want to share Krishna. In fact, you look at advanced devotees, they hide their devotion because they don't want people to glorify them. Right? They hide their ecstatic symptoms. They hide how much Krishna means to them. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mother.
I'm glad you're all smiling.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. You made some very, very salient and relevant points. I think we are going to take home. Shrimad Mahaprabhu, you have something to share before we bring this to a close? Shmamara Prabhu, if you're still here, please.
Sorry, thank Mother for her presence and has some right very much appreciative of thank you very much.
Okay, Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Hare Krishna.
It was blurry. He said he's driving.
Okay.
Yeah, so, but he really enjoys everything you shared with us.
Thank you so much.
You know, you said that a real cheater does not want to be told that he's cheating, and that reminded me of sometimes we may have something like this going on, a class going on, and somebody's dozing, and you tell the person, "Hey, my friend, you're sleeping." He says, "No, I'm not sleeping." So we should not be dozing because we cheating time.
Yeah, I think we've all had some experience of cheating.
We all do, yes.
Come on, ask anyone. If you offer someone a shortcut, they will always take it.
Yes.
If you use Google Maps, don't you always look for the shortest route?
Yeah. Yeah. So
Thank you so much.
We're going to humbly request all the devotees to kindly unmute, and we all chant the loudest Hare Krishna Mahamant to express our appreciation for our revered speaker. Jai.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Krishna,
Krishna, Hare Hare.
Rama,
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare
A great CITI-SAKTI Devi Mataji ki
Jai.
Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, Jagannath Pandit Prabhu.